Hello and welcome to Filmi, ladies. I am Beth and Pitu is here. And for the first time on this series, I believe we are invoking Rabindranath Tagore.
It's a step up from always invoking Devanand.
We're getting classy around here. We are talking about two film adaptations of Tagore's 1895 short story, The Hungry Stones. I'm using its English title because I find the Bengali title very hard to get my brain around. It will come up. I apologize in advance. All my Bengali friends know I can't pronounce anything and they tolerate me anyway. I appreciate it. I apologize. Pitu has had a lesson. She's tried to teach me. We'll see what happens. The two film adaptations of the 1895 story are Kshudhita Pashan, the Bengali version from 1960, directed by Tapan Sinha, whose name I'm probably also mispronouncing. Again, I apologize. And Gulzar's 1990 Lekin. So we have some interesting pauses going on, very different films made from the same source, which seems to be a theme that we're enjoying lately.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the short story first, because it is quite short. You read it, yes?
I tried to read it.
Oh, okay. And I actually did read it just a few hours ago. So you didn't, I know you are a great reader. What happened that you did not finish it?
By the time I read the fifth Methinks, I got very tired of it. And I find that this happens a lot with like really old Indian writings that are written in a regional language that I don't speak and that they get translated into English. And I don't know if they're actually written in such a lumbering way or if it's just the translation that is the way it is, but I just can't get into it. I mean, I tried, but after reading the methinks and the who thinks and the aforementions, I gave up. I was like, I can't do this. So
Okay.
I ate a Haagen-Dazs bar ice cream instead.
I mean, that's always approved by everyone for every occasion. So if our protagonist had had more ice cream, he may have been a little happier.
He would have been.
Who's to say? So for those who don't know the story, and if you've seen either film, that's not the same as the story because the story is quite different from both, I would say, especially from Lekin, which we'll get into. But the basic gist, it's a story within a story. So we have a narrator frame. People have met someone on a train platform and they're talking about this ridiculous story he spun them. And at the end, the person telling the story goes off to get on the first class compartment with an Englishman. And our Indian, I assume, narrators are, they're like, that was hogwash. And the other one's like, no, that was amazing. And the fact that they don't agree about the story causes a rift in their friendship, which is quite something, I think. But the basic gist is that a tax collector is sent to a rural area that has an abandoned Mughal palace. And no one can spend more than 3 nights in the palace without losing their mind or dying, I think. And that is what basically happens to our protagonists in both films. They engage with ghosts in various ways, and mental unhealth follows. The Bengali one's a little shorter than the Hindi one. There are various differences that we can get into, but the story is quite concise. It is on Project Gutenberg, which I will put in the show notes here so you can read it. I really liked it. I'd read it about 10 years ago and I reread it just this afternoon and was like, woo, all engaged again. This is a news flash of like, wow, Tagore's a good writer. I really enjoyed the story. And what I think both films don't get at, that I think the story does a little bit more, is the idea that these stones of the palace are hungry. Right? Like, I think that the title is so juicy in this story, and I don't feel that either film version quite gets at that. They are successful at other things, and they maybe weren't even trying to do that. So I don't really mean that as a critique of them or as a negative about them, but I do think the short story, the original source, is a little spookier, ghostier, whatever, than the others. Now, let me issue the following caveat. I've seen the Bengali one multiple times. I really, really love it. And I just saw the Hindi for the first time the other day. I could not for life of me find it with subtitles. So I did miss a lot from the Hindi version. Please just know that going in, that my usual impairment of depending on subtitles was not even available to me because there were no subtitles. But the Bengali one we both watched was subtitled. Hurrah. I want to start by asking you, Pitu, about what you thought of the Bengali one, sort of just on its own, standalone, because this was the first time you'd seen
I
it.
really liked it. So I like both movies. Lekin, of course, I'm far more familiar with because I've seen it multiple times, and it's one of my favorite like ghostly movies,
Mhm.
and just one of my favorite movies in general. And Kshudhita Pashan was also really fun. It was very spooky and eerie. I did wonder going in if it would be as engaging as Lekin is, because Lekin benefits very greatly from being set in Rajasthan. Which we've spoken of before as being a very photogenic state,
Yeah.
and film being a visual medium. And also, what could be spookier than like the desert, right? I guess jungles would be as spooky, but Kshudhita Pashan does not have that. So I was like, well, is it
No.
going to be as like visually appealing as Lekin is? I did not think it would be. And while I am still a little bit more partial to the sand dunes,
Mhm.
and the sandstorms in Lekin, I do think that the cinematography of Kshudhita Pashan really managed to like pull me in, because I loved first of all, I like that it's in black and white, because black and white just
Yeah.
lends itself to horror or gothicness.
Mhm.
And I also liked the ruins, and the lattice work was really great. It's so
The
pretty.
the light and the shadow of the jelly
Yes.
and everything in that one is
Yeah.
spectacular. And the print that we saw, which I think is the only one I've ever found available, is terrible, right? There's a lot.
Yeah.
If this could be restored, Tommy Dan 55, got a new project for you. If this could be restored, I think it would really, a lot more people would watch it and know about it and all. But
Yeah.
it is, I wish that there were a more pretty print of it, because it is pretty damaged.
It
But
is
you
very,
can still tell it's beautiful. And
yeah, but it's very pretty. It's very like eerie. It's very spooky. And of course, I mean, the person playing the tax collector is like amazing. Like he's fantastic. I
yeah.
was also worried about how I was going to find the ghost, because I love Dimple Kapadia in Lekin. And I was like, well, but I actually did like the lady who played a Mumtaz as well. So that worked out. I love the music of Lekin, and then I didn't think the music of Kshudhita Pashan was as good, but it did had some, very good like classical ragas and stuff, like hovering around in the palace. I was very unsure about where it's set, though. It's clearly not set in Bengal, because the postmaster says to him that I came to visit you because you're Bengali and blah, blah.
Mhm.
But I couldn't quite tell. I just assumed it was somewhere in North India.
Yeah.
But that wasn't like clear. But I did enjoy it very, very much. It was very fun. Yeah.
I was struck this time by the kind of, there's Hindi in this film too, right? So that
Yeah.
mostly they're speaking Bengali, but not always. And then I really, the sort of international nature. Oh, so I didn't actually explain the story, did I? So the idea is 250 years before the story, which would be 1645, according to our chronology. There's a Mughal prince who builds this palace, basically his palace of depravity and lust, we're told. And it's full of imprisoned, basically, women for his harem, more or less,
Mhm.
dancing girls of various kinds, whatever. And the story is specifically about one of them and her dismay at being, that's not the strong enough word, she's distressed, she's distraught, this is her terror at being in this palace. And both the films kind of do different, they elaborate this in different ways. The
Mhm.
Bengali one has, so the first time the tax collector, he decides to stay in the palace overnight. He cannot resist its lure. He has to stay there. And I mean,
Despite the madman screaming,
yeah,
"Go! It's all
I love
lies!
it. So
Go away!"
the film opens with a man screaming, "It's a lie, go away." And you're like, what's happening? I've seen this film at least 3 times before yesterday. And I jumped out of my skin every time he comes on the screen, even
Right.
though I knew he was going to. He's very scary. And eventually we find out he is a person who did manage to survive staying in the palace, but at the cost of his sanity. So,
Sanity.
um, I just think that Soumitra Chatterjee is so good at
He's
these
lovely.
these kind of like quietly expressing thoughtfulness of various kinds. And like, brooding in real life is super annoying, but brooding in film when done by him is just gorgeous. Nobody broods like he does. And you get this,
Yeah.
you absolutely believe that he can't resist this palace, even though knowing it's haunted, and kind of having a sort of jovial nature until he gets sucked in. And it's just, I totally buy him kind of following a ghostly lady around the palace at night and then waking up in a corner because he fell asleep or got conked on the head or whatever overnight. And he's like, where at? He doesn't even remember, what happened.
I love the scene where he's just like sitting in this like chair and he's just like, in the distance.
He does that in a lot of his movies and I'm all for it. I completely lost it.
Oh wait, you didn't complete the story.
Right, because it's so in the short story, we're just about to hear what the horrible thing is that's happened to this young woman, but then they're on the station platform and the connecting train comes and this man telling the story goes away. So we don't find out. In the Bengali one, we get a flashback to someone from the imperial palace going to buy this woman. And the man who goes to buy her is Soumitra Chatterjee, with his little Mughal mustache and finery on. And then on their way back, they're in Persia, I think, right? Or Afghanistan or somewhere.
That's the other thing that was very confusing because they kept saying that they got her from the Arab lands, but I don't know what Arab lands is. And the way she's dressed and the way she speaks Hindi sounds very Afghan to me, but Afghanistan is not Arabia. So the film is very unclear on geography.
West of India.
Somewhere. They're like there. She's from there.
She's from a stan somewhere, not Hindustan, a different stan. In the Tagore story, she's from Persia.
Okay.
But so they are then on the trip to take her back to this, palace of depravity, and she and he form a bond with her telling him about where she was captured from and her life at home. She wanders into the sea at one point because she's like, I don't want to live anymore. And he's like, come on, I'll take, I'll help you. He drops her off at the palace. She's going to be educated by a poet at the palace, I believe it is. And then we see he tries to help her escape, but they are caught. And their punishment, spoiler, is that the emperor, who is very much, again, underplayed, but is one of these like soft-spoken, really bad baddies. He's a psycho.
He's psycho. He made me shiver.
Yeah. He says to the man, you have to leave my kingdom, but you can go wherever you want as long as you never come back. And you're like, oh, okay. And then she is going to be locked in a dungeon for the rest of her life. And every morning someone will come in and whisper the name of her lover so that she never forgets.
Yeah.
And then he is strapped to his horse and the horse is sent off. So it's actually not quite as good as it seems. It's horrible. And then the emperor says, I'm going to leave now. I have a weak heart. I shouldn't watch anyone suffer.
I was like,
he's a bad baddie.
He was nasty.
He's a nasty piece of work. So again, so if you've seen Lekin, and I assume more people listening to this have seen Lekin than have seen the Bengali one, it is quite different. And I look forward to hearing kind of what the details are in Lekin, because I was, kind of guessing at some of it. One thing I really like about the Bengali one, they both have this to an extent. Bengali has it's more pared down. It's a little more simplified or something in all kinds of ways.
Mm-hmm.
And that really, really worked with the kind of ghostiness to me. And I just, the black and white, the shadows, the music is Ali Akbar Khan. So like, I have turned on this film just to listen to it before, like while doing other things, to have the music going, because I love the music from it. There's a kathak performance, which one of our blog compatriots has written about with now I don't know anything about kathak. I could not judge this performance at all. But as I've mentioned, Bengali films of this era don't really tend to do song and dance numbers. And this is one of the fairly few exceptions, and it's only got 2 people dancing, but it does have the live musicians, and they're watching. The ghost and the tax collector are watching a performance, which of course then evaporates and disappears and whatever. I feel like our ghost from this story and the ghost from Paheli could kind of go into business together and wreak some real havoc / get some really lovely relationships going if they wanted to.
They both the ghosts, so Mumtaz from Kshudhita Pashan and unnamed ghost from Paheli, they both have this kind of like mischievousness that I liked.
Yeah.
Like probably my favorite scene in Kshudhita Pashan was where the tax collector, he's just going for a jaunt, and he's wearing his jodhpurs and everything, and he's going across this meadow, and his hat falls off, and then there's just this kind of like la 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 kind of music, and his hat keeps falling, and he keeps trying to catch it, and you hear some giggling, and you don't see anyone. The assumption being that it's the ghost Mumtaz who's like playing with his hat. I just thought that was like so lighthearted and sweet, and it was just like such a nice moment. And then of course his hat falls near the water, and he looks up, and there's this horrible like mehel again, and it's like that moment is over. So yes, I do think that the ghost from Kshudhita Pashan would become friends with the ghost from Paheli, because they both have like a certain impishness to them, whereas the ghost from Lekin does not. Dimple is very much like a traumatized waif who is like stuck in that time period and has not been able to process her trauma.
Will you go over kind of the basic of the plot of that one, especially as it differs from the others?
Yeah. Oh, and so then you forgot to say how Kshudhita Pashan ends.
Yes, I did.
So this
Why
is the
do I not remember?
flashback stuff. So this is the flashback stuff, and now
Yeah.
he basically needs to like help her like gain salvation or whatever, right?
Yes. What actually happens in the end? I don't remember. I saw it yesterday and I don't remember.
I watched it today, a few hours ago. I think we were both spellbound.
It
I think
doesn't
at the end,
really
it doesn't
resolve.
say, it doesn't resolve. I
Yeah.
think in the end, it's just kind of like he sort of like makes his peace with it. Whereas with Lakin, there's a very sort of like definitive ending. Lakin feels more like almost like a who done it or how done it to me.
Yeah.
Apart from being eerie.
Especially with the sort of, well, you'll get to it, but like how people who appear in the flashback ghosty parts then turn out to be, we think, real. And I actually, in both of these, I really love that it's never completely clear what's real and what isn't.
Yeah.
Sometimes I find that maddening, but in this, I just bought it hook, line, and sinker. I thought it was beautifully, unresolved and eerie, and kind of there's a lot there about unknowing, and the fact that it's a tax collector who deals with like figures, facts, accounts.
Like he's a bureaucrat.
He's a bureaucrat, and yet he's instantly seduced by the sort of unknown historical, the like veil of history and ghosts and all this other stuff that has nothing to do with the rest of the life he leads, as far as we know. And again, it's kind of like Kishan and Ghost Kishan, right? Like an accountant again. I found that very effective, and that's in the story as well. It's a tax collector in the story. So
yeah,
but
I love the scene also where he picked up the pebble and he was like just gonna throw it, and then he sees the fountain with like the rose water and everything, and he's kind of like, wait, what is going on? That was like a really good moment too. There's a lot of like slates of hand that are like very cool.
And yeah, the way a pebble will shatter an image in the water, right? I feel like the water in the Bengali one sort of stands in a little bit the way the sand does, although not exactly. So it was maddening to me that the one movie I've ever seen about someone who works in a museum in Hindi cinema does not have subtitles for me.
The good thing is you're not missing a whole lot from the museum-y point of view, because I promised that if there was like a very interesting like museum-y dialogue or conversation, then I would immediately like translate it and send it to you to make you feel better. But you didn't actually miss that because none of his conversations were museum-y. Okay, so Lekin is a little bit different. Story-wise, not completely, but so it starts with Sameer Neogi, the character played by Vinod Khanna, who is not a tax collector. He works for a museum, so he works for the government, I think. And the government, his boss, basically sends him to this like abandoned, falling apart ruin in Rajasthan, in like a tiny little village. And he said that we're basically like, this place is like dilapidated, but there might still be some artwork over there that's worth like salvaging, and we don't want it to get like all destroyed and everything. So they basically want him to go and determine what's worth salvaging and what's worth leaving to the elements, and just kind of like survey the area. So he's like, fine. So then they send him by train to this little village, and on the train he meets this waif-like person who won't say much but has these gigantic eyes and just looks very like Little Match girlish, and that is of course Dimple Kapadia. And he has like a few conversations with her, but she won't talk. Same like in Kshudhita Pashan, he's trying to get her to talk and he's trying to converse with her, and she's just quite like recalcitrant. And then he gets to Rajasthan, and he finds that there's a bunch of like Banjare, like tribals, who've been squatting in the premises of the palace, and they're like spoiling everything. And he yells at Dimple Kapadia because she's like cooking something over there, and all the smoke is like spoiling the marble or the sandstone. And he gets mad at her, and she's like, "Okay, I'm so sorry." And then she takes him inside the palace, and she's like, "Look, there's all these people used to be here. Don't you remember?" And he's like, "No." But then he starts seeing them, and like he panics, and he's like, "What the hell is happening?" And so Vinod Khanna's character is different but also similar from Soumitra Mukherjee's character, because that guy is a tax collector, this guy is a museum worker or specialist or whatever, but they're both men of not quite science necessarily, but at least men belonging to the mundane.
And they're catalogers, basically, right? They are taking stock of things and measuring and describing. And yeah, he's doing
they're like
the kind
data
of
analysts
the
in
less
a way.
fun part of museum work, in my opinion.
Right. Like they're part of the mundane and the everyday and the cataloging and all of that stuff. And then suddenly they're thrust into the magical and the mysterious, and they don't know what to do with themselves without losing their mind. And where Soumitra Mukherjee has this very like boyish, impish charm. I don't know how old he was when he did this movie, but he looks so young. Well, 25. And he looks it. He looks young and darling.
It's his third film. He's done Upper Sansar. He's done Devi, and then this.
Right. Wow. Yeah. And he looks it. He looks young. He looks like he has like stars in his eyes, kind of. He has this innocence on his face. Every time you see Mumtaz, his face like lights up, which was so endearing to see. Whereas Sameer's character is like middle-aged. He's this middle-aged dude, and he wants to do his job, and he plays it in exactly the way that you would imagine Vinod Khanna would play even a museum worker, where he's very like, he wants things done right now. He will brook no opposition, and you will do it exactly how he tells you to, because he's going to be grumpy if you don't. So he plays it in that sort of like brawny way that you assume Vinod Khanna would. By the way, I want to say, I wish we talked about Lekin when we did our episode on actors playing against type.
Oh, yeah.
Because who would have cast Vinod Khanna as a museum worker? Who would have cast Dimple Kapadia as like a ghost? And who would have cast Amjad Khan as the avuncular, amiable friend?
You're right. They're all three. She's the one who struck me.
Topsy-turvy.
She struck me in particular because what I've seen her in so far, she is contemporary to when the film is being made, and well, with the exception of Ajuba, which is, who knows when, she is glamorous in some way or other. Even if she's a police officer, she's pretty glamorous, so to see
confident,
to see her as a soft-spoken kind of wafy, I hesitate with this word, but it came to my sort of victim-y kind of person was really different for me. Now, I've not seen a ton of her films, but still, that was very much for me against type. Yeah,
it was very much like, I have no idea who did the casting for this film, but it's like they deserve an award, because I would not have cast any of these people in any of these roles, and yet it really works. So anyway, so that's his job to do these things, and this is where it's similar to Kshudhita Pashan in that, the real and the mythical or supernatural starts blending together, and he does the same exact thing that this guy does, which he goes and stays in the place that he has been warned not to. Amjad Khan is his friend, and Amjad Khan, so in Kshudhita Pashan, the person who is kind of like the voice of reason, there's two people. There's I think his name was Hakim Khan or Kareem Khan. Kareem Khan. I think Kareem Khan is the guy who is sort of like the day-to-day manager of this like old ruin or estate or whatever. And then there's the postmaster. Yeah. And then there's the postmaster who just befriends him because he happens to be Bengali. And these two people.
And that postmaster is, by the way, played by Chabi Biswas, who is like Bengali uncle extraordinaire. He's an amazing actor. You see him, and he's in Devi. He's the dad in Devi.
Right.
So he's in, he's in everything, and he's not used a whole lot in this, but I'm not sure if I would say he was against type that I know of. I may not be well-versed enough in his movies, but he's definitely not playing stern patriarch, which he often does. He's like, avuncular. Oh my God, another Bengali. And he honestly,
come and eat fish curry.
I was like, you're playing to stereotype real hard here.
But so they're the ones who keep warning him, like, you shouldn't stay there, it's haunted, nothing good has ever happened to anybody who lived over here. And he doesn't listen to them, of course, because if he listened to them, we wouldn't have a movie. And then in Lekin, it's Amjad Khan, who is his friend, who lives in the vicinity, and he's in charge of like the police or whatever, although you never see him in uniform and you never see him working. But he basically keeps telling him, I have a big house, why don't you just come and stay with me? Don't stay in that place, it's really bad. And Vinod Khanna is like, nope, I'm gonna stay there. And so then the movie's kind of conversion there, it's the same sort of thing that's going on. What to me was the biggest difference between them was that so in Lekin, when you have the flashback and everything, the king who lives over there is actually not some like super depraved person who does this on the regular, where he like gets people to go to like do sex trafficking, basically. It's not something he regularly does, one assumes, but he is a terrible person. It's more like he falls in love and is attracted to the characters of Hema Malini and Dimple Kapadia, who are the young singers / dancers who are being trained by their ustad. And he decides to basically rape them. And when the ustad, played by Loknath, discovers his evil ways, he is imprisoned, and he tells the two girls that they need to escape, but there is no love angle there. So the ustad says, I'm too old and also I'm in a dungeon. But he says to one of his like acquaintances / workers, whose name is Mehru, and he says to this person that the king might try to kill you or whatever, but you need to save these girls. So in the middle of the night, take 2 camels and escape. And because he gives him, like, he makes him vow on the Quran. And so therefore Mehru is not able to say no, although one presumes he doesn't want to get involved in any of this shit, right? But he's like, okay, fine. So he tries to help them escape. The camel that's in the front, which is being ridden by Hema Malini, manages to make it through the sandstorm and get to the other end to safety. But the camel that Dimple Kapadia is on and that Mehru is leading, that camel goes into #grumpy camel mode and decides it doesn't want to have anything to do with the sandstorm, and it just sits and it's like, nope, ain't budging. And that was the one time I wanted to tell the grumpy camel not to be grumpy and to actually do his job. I know, but Grumpy Camel was like, no, it was not having it. So Dimple Kapadia actually perishes in the sand. She never makes it across the desert, and so does Mehru. Mehru dies as well. So neither of them make it across the desert. Meanwhile, Hema Malini, her character, goes to the other end, eventually gets married, has a child, and she never finds out what happened to her sister. Meanwhile, the king is long dead. And so Vinod Khanna's character today, as Samir, the museum worker, is a reincarnation of Mehru. And fate has brought him back to this place. And Reva, the ghost, recognizes him as the person who was supposed to help her escape, but he couldn't because he died as well. So she's kind of looking to him for help. And when all the flashbacks comes together and he realizes it, he decides, I have to help her. And he actually helps her kind of like, one assumes, go towards the light or whatever. Again, it's like a little bit open-ended. Where Kshudhita Pashan is very different is that Soumitra, his character was actually a terrible, horrible person who helped his king do these horrible sex trafficking things. And one wonders why he even chose to help Mumtaz's character. It could be that his conscience suddenly came awake. It could also just be that he's willing to help her because he has a crush on her. But if it was some other woman, so he's clearly a very awful character. And when I realized, I was like, wait a minute, the dude at like the slave auction or whatever, that's him. I was so angry and mad. And I was like, what the heck, man? I expected better from you. And that was a big shocker for me because that's not how it is in Lekin.
And I assume
but
we're supposed
I liked it.
to view that is an incarnation angle as well, but it's not clear, I don't think.
But I think that would be the assumption.
And that is not in the Tagore story. There is no, we don't get that far in the Tagore story about the on the ground trafficker. We don't hear about him.
Right.
So
and there's no like trafficking or anything like that in Lekin. In Lekin, Mehru is as much a victim as Reva is, as everyone else is, to the machinations of this king. And in Kshudhita Pashan, Soumitra character is also one of the people that props up this horrible king and his rulership and like feeds into it.
And he should be haunted by the ghosts, right?
Yeah,
like
he absolutely
if he's
should
the
be.
reincarnation of the bad guy from the past, then he deserves to be haunted.
Right.
And in Lekin, the amount of years obviously is much, much shorter. It's a generation and a half or something like that, basically. Let me ask a question about the casting. So when we see the flashbacks, Dimple's character is played by a different actor who's much younger. It's a girl.
A child,
Maybe what, 15, 16 at the most, I would say. So that adds to the horror of what the king is.
So the king, played by Vijayendra Gadge in Lekin, says that he's going to lock up the Ustad, he's going to lock up the little girl until she achieves puberty, and then he's going to take advantage of her.
So she's like 12 or something.
Yeah. So she's basically just jailed. That's why there's that song, "Main ek sadi se baithi hu," I'm waiting for an eternity. Is raah se koi guzra nahi, no one has come my way. Like she's just waiting to be rescued because she's basically a child and she has no power, she has no agency, she has no voice. She's truly helpless. And the one person who was supposed to help her cross the sandstorm died with her and couldn't help her because of #GrumpyCamel. So it's just all around very tragic, where I think in Kshudhita Pashan, there is at least some levity and there is also that romance angle between the old person working for the king / tax collector with the ghost, whereas here I don't think there's any romantic angle whatsoever between the museum worker and Dimples. I mean, maybe there's like a little bit of attraction, but
you don't,
not really.
So again, unencumbered by understanding what the words were. I felt like he was in love with her, but then maybe I was also projecting from the Bengali one. So to me, it seemed like he was.
I think it's kind of implied that he has an attraction to her, although does he really love her, or is he just like feeling protective towards her? Does he just feel really bad towards her? I don't know.
And those are very muddied, especially with heterosexual relationships, right?
It's
like
very
I
kind
save
of
her
like
is the same as I love her, which is but
right. And then also the way she looks at him, but I think the way Dimple plays her, I don't think she's in love with him at all. I think she just wants to get the hell out. She just wants to be saved.
So when she finds him on the train in the beginning, when they first see each other, are we supposed to understand that she recognized him instantly as the reincarnation of?
That's what I assumed.
Okay.
That was my assumption. So my assumption was that she as a ghost is just like languishing and waiting. Everybody has moved on. The king is dead. The Ustad is dead. Her sister is God knows where. Meru is dead. Everybody is dead. She's completely left alone. She doesn't know what to do. She doesn't know where she belongs. And then one day, after an eternity, this dude just shows up at a train station. She's like, oh my God,
it's him.
It's Meru. He's supposed to help me. And so she keeps like being around him without saying anything, but she keeps showing him things. She's like, remember this happened? Remember that happened?
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah. So she keeps like jogging his memory and showing him things to make him remember. So I just thought that was so like sad, like,
go ahead.
Like a little child that's like, doing this to their mom. And they're like, do you see that? Do you like, there was like, it just made me sad.
I love in the Bengali one that the ghost does not speak for the longest of time. And the music is score. It's not her performing a song, performing a song. So she's wordless for most of this film, which adds to the creepy, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
It's really interesting. So I was just kind of thinking about how Lekin falls into the category of films about reincarnation where it's not the same actor, which is an interesting subset of reincarnation films.
Yes.
And I always think that's interesting when that happens, because obviously it's easier to cast the same person.
Like Cars, where you have Raj Kiran and then you have Rishi Kapoor.
And the first time I saw Cars, I was so confused. Even though I had subtitles, I was like, that's not the same guy. But it is the same guy. Okay. Why do you think they decided to age up the
Dimple's
Reva
character? I think the assumption is, I actually don't know.
Because she hasn't aged as much as her sister.
She died in the sandstorm.
Yeah. So the ghost
I don't
form
know.
of her is not what she was like when she died, nor is she what she would look like now had she lived. It's somewhere in between.
I think it was something like they decided to escape because she had finally reached puberty. So it was like now she's in imminent danger, if I'm not mistaken.
So
So that's why she would be older, although
when
the
they escape, who
Dimple does
plays?
not look 15. I'm not sure. But also there is another contradiction in Lekin, by the way. And
Tell
that
me.
contradiction is at the end when Vinod Khanna reaches the Ustad's house and Hema Malini's house, the girl who opens the door is Reva. And that girl is Hema Malini's daughter.
Right.
And
Named
apparently
after her
that
sister.
girl is a reincarnation of that Reva. But the thing is, you can't be reincarnated as a flesh and blood human being Reva and also coexist as ghost Reva at the same time. And yet that is what Lekin implies. Because I thought for the longest time, since I've seen Lekin many times, I thought for the longest time that Himalini, okay, so she survives, she gets married, she has a child, and in memory of her dearly missing sister, she names her biological child Reva as a memory. But when I did a deep dive on the internet where I was looking up, in fact, I found Amrita's blog from 2010, where one of the comments was mine, and I sent it to you. And I was like, look, it's Amrita's blog. She mentions that too. So like a lot of people mentioned on the internet where they were like, well, she is actually a reincarnation of that Reva. And I was like, what? How is that possible? So I'm not sure. That's not what I assumed.
And the dad is still alive too.
Yeah, the Ustad. Yeah. But then he dies when Vinod Khanna meets him. It's almost like he's hanging on. I feel like whenever I think of Lekin, I feel like this notion of like time has stood still.
Yeah.
Because to Reva, the world moved on, but she couldn't, which is the whole concept of being a ghost that is stuck on Earth, really, an inability to move on. Hema Malini's character could not move on either. I mean, but for all practical purposes, yes, but like not emotionally, because she still wonders, and I'm sure she has survivor's guilt. I lived, and yet my younger sister died. So she has some survivor's guilt as well. The Ustad also has survivor's guilt because he's like, did Mehru just never come? Did he not try? Did he not even try to save her? I told him to. So in some ways, Mehru, now Vinod Khanna, also needs to prove to the Ustad, I did try. It's just we died. It wasn't intentional. Our bodies were buried by the sands, but I did try. It wasn't my fault. I did everything I could. So he also needs, like, it's like everyone needs closure in Lekin.
I also thought it was interesting that the ghost Reva saves him too, right? In a sandstorm at the end, which was God, that looked like that would have been hard to film. It looked awful. Like poor Vinod Khanna.
It was apparently shot on location.
I mean, it looks miserable. It's falling through the sand and everything.
I took a lot of screenshots of Vinod Khanna in his tight white trousers, and he's on the camel. And then he's hot, so he takes his shirt off, and then he puts the shirt around his head, and then I don't know what happens to the camel, and then he's just like trudging through the sand.
Honestly, like, had they already done the synthol ads by that point? Because that seems like they're recreating that famous ad of him on the horse, but on the camel with a much less desirable climate. Why is he wearing Jitendra loafers in this film?
He's also wearing white. Yeah, he's wearing all white in one scene. And I was like, what is happening to Jitendra? Like maybe they had a bet and he lost. That's what I like to imagine.
And like what, go out in the sand in your loafers? Like, no, man, that makes no sense whatsoever.
He's a bureaucrat. He's not very practical. He's a paper pusher, Beth. None of these men are very practical. I love that in movies, no one ever makes practical, sensible choices. No one. The people who say the practical things are the boring ones.
Yeah, they're the parents or whatever who are just kind of like...
They're like party poopers.
Yeah.
They're like, don't do this. Don't stay there. Don't talk to that person. Wear this taviz. And the hero's like, nah. I'm gonna go get killed. I took a screenshot of Kshudhita Pashan where poor Karim Khan is like so over the tax collector. He practically just goes, oh, every time
like
he
another
sees
one
them.
is falling prey to this castle or this palace. Why do we not just tear it down? I don't know, but
Well, he says that in one scene. He says, if I had all the money in the world,
yeah,
I would buy this place.
yeah,
And Sumitra looks at him and then he goes, and then I would completely destroy it. Every single stone would be destroyed. Like Karim Khan has very strong feelings about this palace.
he
But
does, and I don't blame him.
I find it very interesting that you said, like, because I didn't think about it earlier, but you said that the Tagore story is called Hungry Stones, which to me implies that there is something malicious and malevolent about
Yes,
that building or that construction itself, but there is no such um there that just isn't the thing in either of these two movies. Here it's just the people who live there that were bad. The kings in both films were bad, but
yeah,
I almost feel like someone needs to make another movie where it's about a really bad, where it's the place that's bad.
right. Although he, I get, at least in Kshudhita Pashan, that this guy built the palace, so I guess
Yes,
it's imbued with his depravity or
nastiness.
whatever. Now, is that true in Lekin as well? Did this particular ruler build?
No,
It's
the
older than he
particular,
is, right?
he's actually the younger brother, the
Yeah,
king. So the older king, I mean the actual king or whatever, he gets a lot of money and whatever title or whatever from the British, and so he actually moves to Britain and marries like an English woman and settles there. So then the palace is passed on to his younger brother, who becomes the king, and he is a very bad sort, and he's just like wants to spend money, and he's very extravagant and doesn't want to rule, and he's basically just like this complete hedonist and person of very bad inclinations.
yeah.
And he basically is just running this whole place into the ground. So yeah.
I really like the idea of the title of Lekin. Like, I think that works super well for the,
Yeah.
what a great concept. I mean, again, newsflash, Gulzar is a good writer.
Yeah.
I
But
really, yeah, that's so enticing, and
it is
the
enticing.
ellipsis, like, of course I want to know what happens next. I'm just as bad as the bureaucrat. Like,
Yeah.
I know. Tell me, how does this end?
I wouldn't say as bad as bureaucrat. The thing is, I am that evil friend that would give bad advice and encourage the bureaucrat to make bad decisions for my own entertainment so I can find out what happens, but I'm not putting myself in the danger zone. Because like
Everybody,
people like Kareem Khan are good people, and Amjad
yes.
Khan, like they're good people. They don't want the stupid protagonist to get into trouble. But if the stupid protagonist doesn't get into trouble, there's no entertainment for us. So I would just be the evil person that pushes them and encourages them into trouble.
I mean, I think it's interesting that the story could have just as easily been that for some reason he has to stay in the palace, right? Like,
Right.
it's the only place around or whatever, right?
Which is
And that,
essentially how every Ramsey brother movie begins, that there's a big
right,
storm and this
you got to
terrible
stay
haunted guest
there,
house is the only place, unless you want to camp out in the woods, which no
right?
thank you.
So, and that's, here we have someone who is given sensible alternatives and won't take them, is compelled to do something else, which just ups the, and it ups the sense of how driven, how illogical, and he knows it's illogical, but he does it anyway because he is compelled by Ghosty Lady.
Right.
I
um
love in Kshudhita Pashan, one of the things I love is that at the end, uh Mumtaz, is that her name? Mumtaz
yeah, in the
is
movie her character.
is as he is bundled off on the horse, tied to a horse and sent running, and she is being imprisoned and she's fighting as hard as she can. She is screaming about her own fate. She is not screaming for the fate of her lover, because
Yeah.
actually it's not super clear like he's besotted with her, but I'm not sure, like,
Yeah.
I'm willing to believe she was just using him to try to get out, because
Yeah.
she also tries to stab somebody when we see her with one of those curved daggers and she
Yeah.
uses it. I hadn't noticed that before, and I really loved it this time, that she don't care. She's trying to save herself, and good for her.
She gave me Nadira vibes actually.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
was
she's
very
pretty
like, this
great.
is very Nadira.
And I'm
Yeah.
remembering that the end of that one now, he kind of wakes up and the ghost is helping him. I think it's the ghost who's kind of like, wiping his fevered brow or whatever. And then he
Right.
goes back and he stands at the palace and he's just looking at it. And then
Oh yeah.
he looks quite
Right.
resigned and sad, and then it's over. So it's kind of a like, okay, he at least knows what happened, but he knows he can't do anything about it at that point, I think.
Which at that point, one even wonders if it was just a fever dream.
Right. The whole thing could have been a fever dream for sure.
Yeah. Where I think in Lekin, it's more sort of rooted in reality because there's a lot of other people in Lekin, and there are jeeps, and there are things happening, and there are bosses, and there are reports that have to be filed. Lekin is much more like modern because it's filmed in 1991 or 1990. And so it's much more like, non-eerie in a way. And yet we have Vinod Khanna making piss poor decisions.
Well, that some of those people are real people who still exist obviously helps with that.
Yeah. What other movie can you think of where it's like, because I'm still like intrigued by this whole Hungry Stones idea. I mean, one of the houses that I really love in literature is Satie's house from Great Expectations, where Miss Havisham lives. But I don't think Miss Havisham behaves the way she does in part because of Satie's house. Satie's house is just a reflection of her own like mania or whatever. Do you know any movie? I'm sure there's so many like this. Do you know any movie where the house itself is so malevolent?
I mean, I am a scaredy cat. I don't really watch horror, so you would know much better than I. But there must be, right? There must be some,
like American Horror Story
that are
and stuff.
More evil.
Yeah,
and it's a great. I mean, house as character would be a fun thing to do. And I'm sure people have done it. We're just not thinking of it. But, so for example, maybe this is too on the nose, but the idea of, I kept waiting the first time I saw this movie for a piece of stone from a turret or a balustrade or whatever to fall off and like near miss our hero.
That would be very enjoyable.
That never happens.
Extremely enjoyable. I think that happens in Mahal.
I think you're right.
Yeah, which is very enjoyable. I love it when there's like near misses and people look up and they're like, what the heck? And I'm like, yeah, the building is trying to kill you. Better get out.
Or when you have the, like a voice coming from within the house that seems to be speaking as the house and not just people and inhabitants of the house. But and can a house be, I mean, we certainly have movies where a home is the target of everyone's affection and their goal that they're trying to like save it or inherit it or fix it up or whatever,
it's the
right?
Focal point.
It's really the focal point. It's really the objective of everybody. So why not have a villainous house too, when you can have sort of a worthy house, have an evil house,
That would be so great. Just an evil house. I'm gonna go on like a Google, like I'm gonna go on a rabbit hole once we're done with this like recording, because like I want to know about the evil houses.
And if any of our listeners know about any Indian films that have evil houses, we would love to know about it, because
that would be great.
Yeah. So like, could you get reincarnated as a house, and then the house is evil? That would be so cool.
Well, like, in that movie, Everything Everywhere All at Once, where in one of the realities, in one of the universes, they're both rocks.
Right.
Maybe it could be like that. Like you could be a house. So if you were a house, Beth, what house would you be?
Oh gosh. And I'd love
like if Beth was reincarnated as a house.
As a house. Oh golly. I mean, so, I'm from the Midwest of the US. I grew up surrounded by beautiful Victorian houses. I would love to be a painted lady Victorian house.
Oh yeah.
Now, I don't know if that's actually my persona or whatever. I don't know if that's the right match, but that comes to mind as a house that I would enjoy being, I think. How about you?
Right. I actually don't know. I think I would like to be like a surprising house. Like, those houses that you look at them from the outside and they look perfectly normal. And then you go inside and there are all these like weird lanes and then you press a button, but it's like a bookcase. And then behind it, there's like an actual hidden room. I love those kind of houses. Like anytime you go to like Europe or whatever and you visit like some random duke's castle or something, there's always like hidden basements and hidden things. And
you're an Agatha Christie country house is what you are.
That is what I am. Yes.
A couple 100 years old, full of weird things. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to get that on a t-shirt. I'm a couple 100 years old and full of weird things. # I am weird.
Press
That'd
a
be
button and
fun.
see what happens.
Probably a joker going, ah! So why is it that even though you are a scaredy cat and you don't particularly like horror movies, that you enjoy Kshudhita Pashan, and I assume you enjoyed Lekin, because
Oh,
they are horror
I did enjoy
technically.
Lakin. I mean, number one, I love Soumitra Chatterjee. I think he's just brilliant. And this is with the one exception of the weird laugh that he does a lot in this film, which I find very jarring. Although it's mentioned in the story, the kind of laughter comes up quite a bit for the main character. So like maybe that's kind of his spin on that. But I just think he's perfect in many films, this one included.
Right.
But yeah, this is a very what kind of a romantic film in a way. And the whole like sensible office worker is lured by historical intrigue. Hi. You know? So I think that really speaks to me. I mean, I don't believe in ghosts. I would not do these things, but I love the lure of history is very strong to me. And I find all this, and when there's a scene where he decides to go get himself a Mughal outfit because
Yeah.
that's how he wants to like knock down any barriers between them. So him being modern is he said, like, maybe this is why she doesn't talk to me, I think is what he's thinking. And so he goes and gets this outfit and he's putting it on and he's talking to her about like, he's like, when are you from? Are you Mughal? Are you post-Mughal? Are you Gupta? Like, what's going on here?
Right.
Obviously not Gupta. Look at her. Like she's got the clothes. I don't know the name for the clothes, but they're clearly Mughal.
Right.
But he's trying to figure out what does he know? And then
Right.
what can he do based on what he knows, even though it doesn't make sense? And that's very like that resonates with me, I
Right.
think. But yeah, I just think I like this director. He's done other films that I like. And
Tapan Sinha,
yeah,
yeah.
I just think it's delightful. I think that if I had seen Lakin first, I need to see it with subtitles. It's just so unfair
I
for me to
know.
say much of anything. I think especially in a film like this, where clearly the dialogue is going to be super important because of who's involved with creating it and everything.
Yeah.
I watch lots of films without subtitles, and I know I'm missing things, but this one was especially hard.
The lyrics, actually, like the songs of
mm,
Lekin, are so
sure.
spectacular, and the lyrics are written by Gulzar, and of course if he's the lyricist and the movie director, he's gonna like pour his heart and soul into it. And Surmai Sham, which is like one of the most beautiful,
Mm,
Surmai literally means like, surma is the kohl that you put in
mm,
your eyes, and Sham is evening, so it's like a kohl lined
mm.
evening,
Oh,
so
that's
it's
pretty.
describing dusk.
Mm.
Every line in that song is just, it's so beautiful, it's just so evocative. And the lyrics, the song lyrics are just magnificent in this movie, and just really kind of like heighten all of the creepiness.
I do want to say, so I liked the music in Lakin, but for me, Lata is too old.
Oh.
I really don't like her, the way she sings at this point in her career. And I'm very sorry. I know that's a very unpopular opinion. I know she produced this film, but she just sounds warbly in a really bad way to me. And I don't, so that's an obstacle to me in a song that was
Mm,
so dominated by her. Um, you know, I know, and I won't apologize that that's my opinion, but I recognize that a lot of people don't feel this way, whatever.
right.
But I wish someone else had sung them. But I thought, like, musically as a song, I thought they were beautiful. And I am sorry I missed the lyrics. I'm sure they were gorgeous.
Yeah, it was actually so funny when I was taking like screenshots of both movies, and I was like, ghostly meet cute.
And I love for both of them, they are so unsettling and unsettled. So they remind me of Duvidha in that way that we
Oh
just
yeah.
talked about, right? Like, neither of these gets the Paheli treatment at all.
Right.
It couldn't with a source called Hungry Stones, right? Like that's not
Yeah.
going to end well. But it was really cool to see how these two different versions came out of the same source, especially when the same source doesn't have an ending. So people created different things with it very, very much. But that just the sort of, as soon as you get to the palace, stuff is weird. And
Yeah.
I appreciate in Kshudhita Pashan particularly, it's so economical in how it gets to that right away. Things are instantly strange. You don't understand, like no one understands really what's going on. Someone is leaping into frame, yelling instantly, and again, like you're watching a Bengali movie, but the first words are in Hindi. Like that's really interesting. Like
Yeah.
It's just a strange film. And Lekin takes a little longer to get going, it seems.
Yeah.
But once you get on that train and they meet, it's weird right away. And it's weird in such a compelling way. And especially when we talk about cinemas in which we watch a lot of formulaic films and enjoy those formulas very much. Here's something doing something very different, and it's very engaging.
I think the other thing also that unsettles these male protagonists from the get-go is the fact that they are foreigners in this land.
Right. Yes, very much.
Samir Neogi is not from that little village in Rajasthan. He's going there for work. And neither is the tax collector. That Kshudhita Pashan is not even set in Bengal. So he's a Bengali tax collector in the middle of some North Indian land where they speak in Hindi and where the only Bengali person around happens to be the postmaster who befriends him. So you're already at a disadvantage. You're the newcomer. You're the one who needs to do your job, but also figure out how to survive these weird people and people who are in your way and madmen leaping across the frames and women tinkling in and out. It's like, how are you supposed to do your job, man?
I often really like fish out of water stories, but usually they are done to show, here's what we can learn about each other, and that there's no learning happening here. Nobody's got time for that. Ghosts have things to accomplish. They've got to save themselves, so that's really fun. I hadn't thought about that. And you're totally right. That's a great point that these are foreigners in a foreign land who don't have, and even the guidance that they do get isn't enough for whatever reason, which is kind of cool.
And also whatever guidance you're getting, you can't just accept it at face value. You have to be like, okay, what's your agenda? You just, nothing is ever clear. You're not around, at least in Lekin, he has a friend already in Amjad Khan, and Amjad Khan is very voice of reason all the time, trying to pull him back and just being like, maybe you should take leave of absence, take medical leave, go back to your hometown, because you're clearly slipping into this morass and going crazy. But other than that, it's just you doing crazy things. Okay. Did you have anything else to add?
I would just encourage people to see both of these if they haven't. Kshudhita Pashan used to be on YouTube on the Angel Digital channel, which is a Bengali DVD and production company. I think they used to have a ton of movies. I don't believe it's there anymore. So we watched it on einthuzen.tv, which if you are outside India, you can do. And I believe if you don't have an account, you can just watch, but there are ads. But we got to see it without ads because we are subscribers. Lekin was very hard to find, and
I saw Lekin on YouTube, and it didn't have subtitles.
Of the print, those prints are terrible too. Both these films deserve a restoration. It would be really lovely to see fixed up versions of both of them. But yeah, I just encourage people to watch them. They're really good. I have seen quite a few films based on Tagore stories, but if you have some favorites, maybe other than the Ray ones that everybody knows, I'd love to hear about them, because I really like a lot of what I've seen done with his work. I've not read most of the originals at all, but this is, a great source.
Oh, did you notice that the costumes in Lekin were by Bhanu Thaya?
Sure did. She's everywhere.
I also noticed, and this made me giggle a little bit, but Dimple's outfit in every scene is different. And I didn't know ghosts could do wardrobe changes, because typically when you see ghosts in a movie, they wear that same outfit throughout. I mean, certainly in Kshudhita Pashan, she wore the same outfit throughout. But then when we see Dimple for the first time, she's in forest green chiffon, then she's in indigo chiffon, then in the sandstorm she's in white.
She's very monochromatic, but
she's very
different.
And she has silver jewelry, and her jewelry keeps changing. And I was like, Bhanu Thaya was like, listen, if I'm doing the costumes, I'm going to do multiple. I'm not going to put her in just the one outfit. Sorry. My ghost is fashionable.
Hungry Stones actually describes her outfit.
Oh.
And so I think the one in Kshudhita Pashan is really, it's a pretty good, to my eye anyway, a pretty good, tie to what is being described in the story, which was interesting, because there's quite a few things in the short story that you're like, oh, that's where they got that. Oh, that's where they got that. There's very, very direct references for such a short little thing that How long was that film? 2 hours, maybe?
Kshudhita Pashan was like 1 hour and 40 minutes.
Yeah, pretty
Pretty short.
quick. Yeah.
Yeah.
They really, I mean, both of these flesh out some very interesting bones in a really cool way. I think they're both wonderful and you should watch them. And I think that, oh, and I'll just say, we've talked a couple times in this podcast already about the sort of exotic background of Rajasthan, right? And so here's another great example of it, but it's done in a very different way. Like it's, obviously the story needs to be somewhere kind of rural, but other than that, but we replace hungry stones with hungry sand, and the sand is really
hungry sand dunes.
It is a threat in this film, and that I think it's cool to see Rajasthan used in that way, because more often it is used, I think, as it is in Paheli, where it's sort of like fantastical and pretty and striking, but not scary. So it's cool to get to see it have a different character.
You know what I love? I had a friend in Chicago, actually, who was from Rajasthan, and people who are from Rajasthan, they don't call themselves Rajasthani. The rest of us call them that, but people from Rajasthan usually refer to themselves as Marwadi, they call their own land Marwad. And I once said, like, Marwad, like, that just sounds so interesting. And my friend goes, you know what that means, right? And I was like, no, why would I know what that means? So Mar is like Hindi for like killing someone, like from Mrityu, right? Like Mar. Yeah. And so Marwad, literally, and this is what he said. I don't know if he was yanking my chain, but I'm going to Google it once we're done. But Marwad literally means like the land that, like, it's like it's dangerous. Like it's like a dangerous land. Yeah. So they don't think of, I know, which I was like, what?
Well, and does that,
does
that feed into the, again, I'm going based on films only, the stereotype that comes out in films of the Rajput warrior, right? Like these are people who have swords on their walls and they're not afraid to use them, kind of.
Possibly.
Kind of stereotype.
But the atmosphere, I mean, the region itself, the fact that you're like a civilization in the middle of a desert, the desert alone is capable of killing you. You don't even need a Rajput warrior with with a sword to behead you.
No,
there's sand dunes, there's sandstorms, there's heat stroke, there's all these terrible things that could happen to you. So many. There's grumpy camels around every corner. So there's also ghosts. But yeah, he literally said it comes from the word Marwad. So I feel like people from Rajasthan probably don't glamorize their own land as much as the rest of us do, because we just go there as tourists and we're there to have a good time. And I don't think they have any kind of like rosy notions of what their own like homeland is like. It is the freaking Thar Desert, for God's sake.
It is not for the faint of heart.
It is not for the faint of heart. Okay, I'm really enjoying this thing where we take like 2 movies that are from the same source material and they're so different. Like, it just shows you how the brains are just like,
I hope there's some more that we can watch. So if you know of any other than Devdas, as we've discussed, or Paranita, I don't really need to see that again anytime soon either. But
I've only seen the Sef and Vidya Paranita, just FYI. Yeah.
There's certainly more.
Are there a lot? I was only aware of one other one.
I think there's, because I'm pretty sure there's a Bengali one. I feel like I'm pretty sure I've seen that. Yeah, we would love to know more suggestions, and obviously some of the detective novels fit into this that we could do, but that's a whole other thing that I love. By the way, there is I'm told that there's finally a Bengali detective movie with a woman as the detective.
Oh,
women never get to be detectives.
Right.
So that would be cool. Maybe that'd be a filmy lady we could discuss at some point if we can find that film with subtitles, because that's a challenge.
Right.
But tell us, if you know some pairs of things coming from the same source material, that's a third thing, right? Like a book or a story that's gone, or a play that's gone into these 2 different things. Tell us. We would love to do it, because it is super fun to compare, contrast, and learn what we can from those differences.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you for watching Filmi Ladies. We had a lot of fun talking about Kshudhita Pashan and Lekin, and hopefully you enjoyed this episode as well. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and we will be back next week. Bye.
Bye.